Welcome to this meeting of Babergh District Council Cabinet. I am Councillor John Ward, Deputy and Acting Leader of Babergh District Council, and will be chairing this meeting. May I remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. Please do not interrupt other speakers or hold separate conversations whilst others are speaking. If you are attending a meeting to speak, persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure your mobile phones are on silent or switched off. And finally, we will be using e-voting for this meeting on the modern.gov app, so please can members make sure they are logged in and ready to use the app. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. I'd like now to move to the agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. I have received apologies from Councillor Sally Davis and Councillor Potter.
Thank you. Item 2, to receive declarations of pecuniary or other registrable or non-registrable interest by members. Are there any to declare, members of the Cabinet? No. Item 3, paper BCA 2315, to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of September 2023. Are there any points regarding the accuracy of these minutes? In which case, may I have a proposer, please? That's Councillor Derek Davis, and may I have a seconder? That's Councillor Carter. So, Governance Officer will now conduct the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Councillor Derek Davis, may I have your vote, please? It's not come through, I'm afraid. Thank you, Chair. That is 4 votes for and 2 abstentions, so that's carried.
Thank you. Item 5, questions by councillors.
None received.
Item 4, sorry, I skipped that one, didn't I? To receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received, Chair.
And item 6, matters referred by the Overview and Scrutiny or Joint Audit and Standards Committees.
There are no matters referred, Chair.
And item 7, the forthcoming decisions list. Members of the Cabinet, do any of you have any comments on the decisions list? Okay, thank you. Item 8, paper BCA 2316, the variation of the agreement of the Shared Revenue Partnership. And I'll now introduce this report as the Cabinet Member for Finance, Assets and Investments. So I'm pleased to introduce paper BCA 2316, the variation of agreement of the Shared Revenue Partnership. The SRP is a joint committee of Babergh and Mid-Suffolk District Councils and Ipswich Borough Council, hosted by Ipswich Borough Council, which was formed in 2011 to discharge the functions of the Shared Revenue and Benefits Service for the 3 councils. Anyone can attend its meetings and view agendas and minutes on the Ipswich Borough Council website. A review of the partnership agreement has been carried out, and at its meeting on 6th of September, the committee proposed a deed of variation to the partnership agreement. This has now been recommended for approval by the Executive and Cabinet Committees of the partner councils. There was an earlier deed of variation in 2015, which is summarised in section 5.3. This new deed of variation is provided in Appendix A and also summarised in section 5.4. The proposed amendments to the agreement are: firstly, general housekeeping and updating of the agreement to reflect the changes that have taken place following the 2015 deed of variation. The inclusion of call-in procedures. Previously, there was no mechanism for councillors to question decisions. Short call-in, 5 days in total, is provided for because decisions may need to be enacted quickly. And finally, inclusion of a scheme of delegations. Appendix B contains the full partnership agreement showing the proposed amendments, and Appendix C lists the functions delegated to officers by the Shared Revenue Partnership. I'd like to give my thanks to Shirley Jarlett, the Assistant Director for Governance and Monitoring Officer at Ipswich Borough Council, who is here today, along with Bob Palmer, who both are here to answer any questions. So I would now like to propose the recommendations in the paper and ask for a second, please. Councillor Saul. Members of the Cabinet, do you have any questions? Is your hand up, Councillor? No. No questions? Okay, I'll ask any other councillors present. Councillor McLaren, do you have any questions? Yep.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, the addition to this is the call-in procedure, which we've not had before. Will that be, the process be any different to what we have normally? The routine call-in procedure to overview and scrutiny?
I don't think it will. Obviously, there's the 5-day limit, but I think in terms of anything else, the call-in procedure will be pretty much the same as it currently is.
Can I just ask another sort of side question? I was surprised actually that that was there, because there's many councillors are not aware of the work of the Shared Revenue. I mean, I found it a very interesting committee. I was wondering how councillors would get to know the information to make the call in.
In terms of publicising the minutes of meetings. Shirley, are you able to provide any further information on the call-in process and more particularly ensuring that members of the 3 councils are aware of the committee's deliberations?
Yes, Chair. Good afternoon, councillors. Firstly, the call-in procedure has been added because I feel it was an omission in the first place, because, of course, the Joint Committee has delegated authority from the executives or cabinets of the 3 councils, so call-in should apply. It is the normal procedure, so your procedure at Babergh would apply, and it would go to Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and the monitoring officer would make those arrangements. So far as knowing about the decisions, it's a public meeting, so in the same way you would get to know about the Cabinet meeting decisions today, it would be exactly the same. It's a public meeting and the minutes are published. Very welcome to attend any of the meetings, and I know the committee has previously sought to publicise the work of the partnership.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Oh, Councillor McCraw.
Yeah, the Mid-Suffolk representatives have already said they'd be quite happy to provide a short report after each of the SRP's meetings, and as the Babergh, one of the Babergh representatives and the current chair of the committee, I'm more than happy to provide that. I don't anticipate it being longer than a single page of A4 as a brief summary, just to make people aware of what the SRP has done at that meeting. That'd be okay.
Thank you, Councillor. If there are no further questions, we'll move into debate. Does anyone from the Cabinet wish to make any comment? So can I conclude that we're all happy with the deed of variation? Excellent. Well, we'll move to the vote then.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, members. That is 6 votes for, that's carried.
Okay, now, moving on to the next item. That's item 9, paper BCA 2317, the cost of living, a review of the 6-month plan and... Oh, yes, sorry, yes, I've just been reminded. We are moving items 9 and item 10 around because to allow Shaheen Warren to take part earlier rather than later. So item 10, paper BCA 2318, the corporate plan refresh. So I'll now introduce the report as acting leader of the council. I'm pleased to introduce paper BCA 2318, the corporate plan refresh. The current corporate plan was drawn up by the Babergh and Mid-Suffolk administrations after the May 2019 elections, and now, following the elections this year, it is right that the new administrations update this in line with their new priorities. Furthermore, since 2019, the districts now have new challenges and opportunities to focus on. It will always be the council's role to provide high-quality services, but we are ambitious and want to see our towns and communities really thrive. Since the May elections, our new administration has been delivering an initial action plan, which includes a relaunch of neighbourhood plans, a Pride in Your Place programme, and to be able to enable owners of listed buildings to benefit from advances in more energy efficient and zero carbon technologies, to implement a contractor scheme, and finally to promote community transport. But we've also been working on a long-term vision and our strategic priorities together with that to make Babergh even better. And I'd like to remind everyone, we are already one of the best places to live in the UK. The vision and strategic priorities that will underpin the refreshed corporate plan can be found in Appendix A and are the result of workshops and other meetings that we've had since May. Our vision is built on 3 themes. Firstly, we will take the lead in responding to the challenges of climate change and protecting and enhancing our natural and historic environments. Secondly, we are ambitious for our communities, economy and young people. And thirdly, strong communities will be built on good housing, well-being and pride in the place we live. As part of the refresh process, we have agreed that we will engage with our communities, businesses, partners and other stakeholders on the vision and priorities over the next few weeks. We will be making a particular effort to engage with groups that represent seldom heard voices in our communities to ensure we hear from everyone. Our message to the public is, this is what we think, what do you think? We want people to tell us what they like, what they don't like, what they think we've missed, and what matters most to their community. We want to capture wide-ranging views from a diverse group of people. In short, we want everyone to help shape the future of their own communities. Why is it so important to get all of this right? Well, we need to put ourselves, firstly, obviously, in the shoes of today's teenagers, and where they'll be in another 20 years, and think about what legacy we have left for them. When they look back, what are they going to say we should have done more of? What are they going to be angry with us about? Serious long-term change takes time, discussion and thought. It also requires us to listen to and work with our communities. I would like now to introduce Shaheen Warren, Principal Practice Lead from New Local, one of our partners who will be delivering the community engagement. And she also has a short presentation on the engagement we're intending to undertake. But first I'd like to propose the recommendation in section 3 of the report that we should endorse the proposed engagement and ask for a seconder. Councillor Saw, thank you. So Shaheen, over to you for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for the introduction, and thank you also for accommodating a frenzied train schedule to move things around. So my name is Shaheen Warren. I am the Principal Practice Lead at an organisation called New Local. We have been partnered with Babergh and Mid-Suffolk District Council teams to help with and advise on the corporate plan refresh, specifically looking at how do we incorporate an engagement plan with communities, residents, staff and other partners to be able to inform and enrich in that kind of future roadmap and action plan. I have a very small connection to this part of the world in that my in-laws live in Long Melford, so I'm familiar with the patch a little bit. I'm looking forward to digging in even deeper and kind of exploring lots of other wonderful things that this region has to offer. I'm going to take you through a sort of overview of the engagement strategy and some of the design considerations that we've been working through, and then cover what does that mean for the activities that we'll deliver over the next few weeks. and then we'll take some time at the end for any questions that you might have. Just to kick us off, a little bit about New Local, for those of you who are unfamiliar with us. So we are an independent, not-for-profit think tank, and we have 3 kind of core service offerings. We are home to and maintain a network of 70 plus councils up and down the country, of which Babergh Mid Suffolk is part of that network. And that network is united behind the idea of community power. And it's, in its simplest form, it's the belief that community's voice has a vital role to play in the delivery and sustainability of community-led public services. We then have a small but mighty research and policy team that explores a number of different issues that are relevant to local government today, from climate change to social care to building economic resilience, and how we might apply and address those changes through a community-powered approach. And then very finally, and I belong to the practice team, which is all about taking those wonderful ideas and implementing them into action. So working alongside councils and local authorities and to collaborate with people and their communities and their partners to really deliver that long-standing and transformative change. This is just a map of the councils that are part of our network, a spread across geography, but also we work with all different political stripes. And on the right-hand side is a list of our corporate partners who are also interested in partnering with the public sector and driving community-powered change within their own organisations and in partnership with councils. So then to move us on to our kind of project, and just to say that we have been working very closely, shoulder to shoulder and hand in hand with the Babergh Mid Suffolk District Council project team. So I'm representing the work of many, many people across the council here, and indeed in New Local as well. We have spent around the last kind of 6 weeks or so thinking about what is the engagement process that really responds to and will generate the insights that are going to enrich in the future corporate plan for the district council. And the engagement plan is specifically targeted at communities and residents primarily, partners, so business community, towns and parish councils and others, and some internal staff engagement to think about the implications of that plan and the insights for future roadmaps. So broadly, you can kind of fold the engagement into 2 categories. There's some internal-facing engagement that we'll do with officers and staff, and then some external-facing engagement, which is really the bulk of our work here to drive those insights from communities and residents around the emerging priorities. Just to give you a rough sense of timelines, we hope to launch the engagement this week. We will then continue to engage with communities, residents and others until the 15th of November, and the plan is to be able to feed back those insights to inform the future council plan pre-Christmas. So you have a very ambitious agenda covering lots of different ground, and this is a note to say that whilst we will maintain the sort of core purpose and essence across all of the priorities, you might notice that we use different languages for the different audiences that we go out to. And that is really to do 2 things. One is to make the language accessible and understandable by a wide range of people and communities. And then secondly, to make the engagement that we do around the priorities really meaningful. And so people should be able to relate each of the priority areas to their everyday lives, be able to see the impact in the things that they do and in their realities, and be able to give a response that is both kind of impactful and meaningful in the context of where they're engaging, which I'll get onto in a second. So the means that we will do that are, and kind of what we want to learn and how we want to learn it, are represented on this slide. So if you look at the right-hand side, you'll see that we have a very broad kind of content framework for the topics that we're going to be consulting on. And so very broadly, that splits out into 4 different categories. One is to go in and ask people what their perspectives are on thriving communities, which is a big ambition within your draft priorities and within the draft plan at the moment, and is a sentiment that we want to maintain, but we also think it's really interesting to see what that means today and how that is lived within the communities of Babergh. We'll then move on to asking people what their perspectives and feelings are about the draft priorities. We also want to understand how people feel about the existing spending profile, what they might change about that in the future. And then very finally, and really importantly to New Local as an organisation, we want to be able to tell you what are the existing strengths in all the communities. What are the assets, what are the initiatives that are already happening, and what might drive that really purposeful collaboration with your communities and partners in the future. The way that we will do that is also twofold. So we will have an online survey hosted on Citizen Lab, one that is tailored specifically for the majority of voices, so residents and communities who are digitally connected, who can easily engage in an online survey, and then also a tailored survey for the business community that asks some very specific questions related to them and their needs. And then secondly, we will have some more facilitated sessions for perhaps those communities who are not digitally connected or don't find it easy to connect online, but also are typically those seldom heard voices that are neglected from conversations like this. And one of the big focuses of this engagement is to be as inclusive as possible. So we've done a lot of work with the project team here to really understand who are those communities, where do they exist, and how best to reach them and involve them in this exercise. So this just gives you a highlight of what are the groups that we'll be engaging with. So again, we've worked with internal staff here at the District Council to identify which are the groups that are going to be able to be involved in the engagement process and inform the future corporate plan. So moving from the right box across to the left, we'll be engaging with a number of different partners through this work, mainly towns and parish councils, the business community and the VCSF community. We'll have some engagement for staff internally, but really that is to understand what are the future implications of the insights that are emerging from community engagement. And like I said, we'll be engaging with residents and communities in lots of different ways in order to obtain their perspectives on the draft priorities. I want to talk a little bit in detail about what we are going to do for those seldom heard communities. And this table shows the different groups that are prioritised for this piece of engagement. Of course, this is kind of a non-exhaustive list, like this could be expanded a lot more than it is right now, but we went through a process with corporate managers here to really understand what information do we already have about some of the seldom heard groups that we've identified, and that was to understand if any of that data can be used in informing the priorities and the future corporate plan, but also to limit consultation fatigue in the community, so not going back to the same communities and asking the same questions, but thinking about the resources that we already have to inform. So on that basis, we added in communities and we've also discounted some. And then we've also thought about where are the gaps in our knowledge? What are the communities that we don't hear from enough, where we don't have enough connection, and how might we reach out into those communities? So then on the right-hand side of the table, you'll see some of the anchor organisations that are really helping us to access those groups and create those connections. And it's been actually overwhelmingly positive response from your VCSF community. And I want to say that because that's not true with the many partners that we work in up and down the country. We don't always get such an enthusiastic response. And they have been incredibly helpful in helping build the inroads, make the connections, and helping us to set up for what I think will be a really successful engagement process moving forward. And to say one more thing about our approach here is that we will tailor to the different groups, and it's about meeting people and convening people in the spaces where they already feel comfortable and safe, meeting them where they are, and then tailoring some of that earlier content framework that you saw so that people can really have meaningful engagement with the key questions that we're trying to ask them. A note on the partner engagement. So as you'll see here, we think it's really important to involve a number of different partners, but we understand that sometimes that's not always possible. And so we don't underestimate the power of informing others to keep them in the loop about how the corporate plan refresh is evolving and what we're learning from communities as the engagement process progresses. So what that means is that neighbouring councils and public sector institutions will get regular updates from us. Where we find opportunities for collaboration and learning, we will highlight those to the relevant organisations. For the VCSF community, we're doing a sort of twofold engagement with them. One is to connect with them to help facilitate those conversations with seldom heard communities. The other is to actually engage those organisations on the draft priorities and really engage both the big anchor organisations and the smaller ones on the priorities and kind of understand from the people who serve those kind of diverse communities what they need to see in the kind of future corporate plan and how they feel about the priorities. And then very finally, there'll be opportunities in both the business community and the VCSF engagement for councillors to join, and we will very soon be sharing details of how to do that. So then very finally, before I take questions, what will happen next? So fingers crossed we will go live very soon with both the online survey and the engagement activities. And we'll be sharing invites to some of the sessions that we've included, including specific lunches and events that you're able to attend. Our asks from you are, we would love for you all to be able to spread the word. So we're going to be equipping you with posters and postcards and links to surveys so that you are able to share them widely in your networks. You are the community-facing kind of assets that we have here in the council, so we hope that you will be able to do that, and we also want to host sessions to help you do that confidently. So we will be offering kind of training sessions, facilitation sessions, so that if you want to come along to any of them, you feel equipped to do so. And also, you know, if you want to have individual conversations with your communities, you feel confident going into those and eliciting those different perspectives there. If you have recommendations about where else we should be going, we would love to hear from you. So please do come and talk to us, and maybe we can talk a little bit about that in the Q&A. And then just where we are on progress, we've got about 24 events planned and upcoming, with equal split over both Babergh and Mid-Suffolk patches, and with a good spread across all of those seldom heard voices and communities that we mentioned earlier. I'll pause there. And happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaheen. That's very interesting. Before I ask members of the Cabinet if they've got any questions, just got one from myself. The current engagements, on your last slide, you referred to 24 community sessions. Are they all going to be online, or are they a mixture of online and actually going out to the communities? And in which case, how do you select which communities to engage with? I'm conscious of the fact we've got a lot of different communities and spread out over a large geographic area in both districts, and a lot of it's fairly sparsely populated.
So those 24 sessions are actually all planned to be in person.
Right.
So we're assuming that the online survey will sweep up the majority of people, and likely people who are both you know, kind of used to engaging online and through survey platforms, but who are also very familiar with the work of the council and likely engage in other ways too. Those 24 sessions are really designed to capture the people who don't typically engage across the different seldom heard voice groups that we highlighted previously. That's not to say that we won't encourage online participation when we get there, and if people feel comfortable to do so, you know, they'll have a postcard to take away and they can do it in their own time. So not to discount that they might do that way. And then the other thing I think is important to say is that we totally expect a bit of a snowball effect. So we've already seen the sort of wealth of knowledge and enthusiasm to participate in this particular engagement. I suspect when we start turning up to different events, we will learn about where other communities exist, who we should go and speak to, who is most knowledgeable, most kind of able to help the engagement further along as we go.
Oh, that's good. So it's a flexible process then.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions, members of the Cabinet? Councillor Derek Davis.
This is not so much to yourself, but to the leader and to the chief exec. I remember at the strategy meeting that we made a commitment that we were going to include Babergh's commitment to the armed forces, not just the Covenant, but armed forces in general, and there's no mention whatsoever in this refresh, and it should be part of the priorities, it should be part of the strategy, and it's not even mentioned at all. Ergo, it's not mentioned in the presentation because they've obviously not had a steer that it's important for us at Babergh to ensure that we pay more than just lip service to the covenant, but actually commit ourselves to the armed forces families that live in the district, serve in the district, and also the veterans as well.
The priorities. If you look on page 113, under the Strong Communities theme, you'll see that it's follow our commitments to the Armed Forces Covenant. But I take your point. I think, Shaheen, if it's possible, as part of that community engagement, to reach out to the military veterans, then that would be very helpful. Thanks.
Our goals and our priorities, and it's not in that.
It's on page 113 of your agenda pack.
I'm looking at the presentation.
So, no, it's not in the presentation. You're quite right, and I've just asked if Shaheen can pick up on it, but it is listed in our priorities. It has been included. Shaheen, yeah.
Yeah, I'll respond. So the presentation has included a snapshot of the priorities in order to get them to a place that was, well, to be honest, fits on the slide, and then also is something that we would take to sessions to make sure that they're really understandable with the communities and residents that we're talking to. We do already have planned some sessions with former veterans, particularly the Gurkha community here in Babergh, and so we will be bringing that specific priority to them and including it in the sort of broad range of sessions that we are running. But there is also something about making sure that we're capturing the priorities in a way that is both easy to communicate and kind of easy to understand from a community and resident perspective. And so that's probably why they're sort of not on the slide, but they are in the longer list of priorities that you have there. And they've not been dropped, importantly.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Saul.
I was wondering what sort of response rate you were thinking of, you were expecting on the online survey.
Good question. We were talking about this with the project team today. I think we will look at what previous online survey response rates have been for the council, and then be able to make an assessment from there. I think it's hard to say, especially with this type of process and with the tight timelines that we're working towards, exactly how many people we expect to have and what we would consider a good representative sample of the communities that we're trying to engage. But we can make some inferences as and when it's relevant and appropriate. I think also importantly to say there is a kind of associated comms plan that goes with the engagement, and we will both be checking in on the response rate for the Citizen Lab online survey on an ongoing basis, and then also promoting in the channels where we see that we're getting either a particularly low response rate to encourage participation all the way up until the 15th of November.
Councillor Saul.
Me again. I was wondering how you were going to feed all the responses and the data that you get into strategy formulation, because having done similar exercises myself, I know that you end up with a flood of data, and how have you worked with the council team, the strategy team, to get a good, coherent data parcel?
Really great question, thank you. So in terms of the way that we're going to capture the data, we will have a central tool for all of those facilitated sessions, which will be structured around the content framework. So that already provides us a sort of model for us to be, and there's lots of us running these sessions, so for us to be inputting what we're hearing and what people are saying in the sessions into one into one place. Then what will need to happen is a sort of triangulation between what we've got on the online survey and what we hear in the facilitated sessions to be able to then form the insights that feed into the corporate plan. Sometimes a little more art than science, and so I think we have to remain open to the diversity of perspectives that we're going to get, but also the different ways that people will choose to communicate that back and find a way within the internal project team, which we've started to talk about already, of how we're going to manage all of that incoming data. And then just to say on the new local side, it's not just me, that we have a team of people working behind the scenes here who are going to be really deep in the analysis and interpretation kind of mode once we've got a few of those sessions under our belt. And then really importantly, I think, you know, as an internal project team, we're sort of keeping an experimental mindset, which is if it's not working, if we're not kind of engaging on the right questions or necessarily getting the right input that we need, how might we flex some of the questions? How might we have flexibility within the sessions to be able to tease out that information in a better way? And we'll continuously review that as we go through the engagement process. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I was particularly interested in the engagement planning and the offer of bespoke sessions for councillors. And there's a great long list of engagements there. How will this all be communicated to members of council for them to actually come on board to make sure that the engagement does go the way you want it to?
Great. Fabulous. We would love all the more kind of people who are out there talking about the engagement, engaging with communities on these questions, all the better. We already have so we're doing some training already for some of the VCSF organisations who are planning to either host a session on our behalf or who are going out and talking to residents. So you are welcome to join those sessions. There'll be, I can't remember the dates off the top of my head, but the invites are coming out imminently. There's one in the morning, one in the evening to accommodate different schedules. And then we're also talking about having something more bespoke for officers and councillors so that you have the space and the freedom to interrogate the content framework, ask us questions about facilitation techniques, learn, hopefully we will have got a few sessions under our belt by then, maybe learn some of the lessons that we're learning along the way and feel really confident to then go out and talk about this work or direct people either to the online survey or to a facilitated session.
But follow up, my concern here is not the fact that we're going to do that and these things are available. It's how is it going to be communicated? And if I'm quite frank about it, constantly communicated to remind during all the sessions and the 6-week online survey, how can the message be driven home? And I'm just asking if there's a programme to engage with councillors, I would have said every week. At the very least in a 6-week period, every fortnight. That reminder, that constant message, because I'll be honest with you, so much stuff comes across a councillor's plate that it is difficult to keep track, and we've been through so many 6-week consultations over the years, we can't remember which ones we're involved in at any given moment. So I think it's important to drive that message home with regular communication and you know, punchy communication, if you don't mind my saying.
Thank you, Chair. And just to reiterate, we do have a communications plan that sits behind the engagement approach. Obviously, yourselves are key to helping us get that message out there. So yes, we'll be doing lots to provide updates to yourselves and all councillors, and we can certainly use our existing channels to do that. But our plea would also be to, obviously, for yourselves, for group leaders, you know, to talk to your fellow councillors and encourage that participation. We'll be more than happy to provide supporting material in order for you to be able to do that. So any suggestions that you've got around how we can add some value to some communication messages to encourage participation would be great.
I'm not on, am I? It is, after all, our priorities, our vision, our corporate plan, so we do need to promote it as much as we can. Councillor McCraw.
Yeah, I think we'll have a discussion about exactly how the message can be got across. I'm always concerned about drift over the course of a 6-week period, and I would hate to see a boat be missed.
Sarah?
And just to answer partly some of the question that Councillor Saw asked earlier about the insight gathering and how we feed that back, I just wanted to give some reassurance that during that whole 6-week consultation, we will obviously be keeping abreast of some of the main themes that start to come out of that, and we will of course provide you with updates as Cabinet throughout that period until we get to the point, hopefully I think it's the 4th of December, where we've already got a date in the diary with you where we can then formulate that strategy a bit more. So I just wanted to give you that reassurance.
Any other questions? Councillor McLaren, do you have any questions?
No, thank you, Chair.
Right, we'll move into debate. Does anyone wish to make any further comment from members of the Cabinet? Are we all happy? Good. Well, thank you very much, Shaheen. That was a great presentation, and thank you for answering all the questions. It's quite clear that the strategy you've got there is very comprehensive. You've got quite a bit of work to do in a fairly short period. But thank you very much. Councillor McCraw, did you want any second now? Yes. So, where was it? Yes. So, yeah, thank you, Shaheen, for coming along. Members of the Cabinet, we've got the recommendation that's been proposed and seconded to pursue and to conduct this engagement. It is, after all, what we said we were going to do. So really, let's get on with it. All happy to go to the vote? We'll go to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Please scroll down to the blue line on your voting page. You have to skip one.
Excuse me, I'm not logged in. Would it be okay for a hand raise? Just to get on with
Absolutely,
things?
Councillor Potter, you are?
In favour.
In favour, thank you. Thank you, Chair. That's 7 votes for, that's carried.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Okay, moving on. So it's back to item 9, paper BCA 2317, the cost of living, review of the 6-month plan and beyond. And I'd now like to invite the Cabinet Member for Customers, Digital Transformation and Improvement to introduce this report. Councillor McCraw.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very pleased to introduce report BCA 2317 on the cost of living review of the 6-month plan and beyond. The report provides a summary of the work undertaken in the last 6 months and the latest 6-month action plan, a draft form. This is the 3rd action plan the councils have developed in response to the cost of living crisis, and being one of the fastest councils to at least act in this area. And the work undertaken has been coordinated. It's not just across this council and its services, but many key stakeholders, and particularly I've mentioned Citizens Advice, who support residents in the following key areas, and these are the key areas of the plan itself. Maximising income, accessing advice, food insecurity, fuel poverty, and health and well-being. The cost of living has clearly emerged as an ever-changing landscape, and while inflation may have fallen from its peak, what has happened has already happened, and it's not going to be reversed. So those increases are things that people must live with. Regarding food and housing prices, there was good news today. Food prices slightly dropped by 0.1 to 9.9% food inflation, which, coming down from 15% means it's still there. It's not going away. High energy costs also continue, and we're entering the colder months. And increasingly, Citizens Advice and ourselves, we're seeing increased levels of debt and negative budgets. This cost of living crisis is beginning to show the signs of becoming a debt crisis, and that means it could be here a lot longer than mere inflation. The cost of living continues to be a key priority, so we're proposing alongside the latest 6-month plan to develop a longer-term approach. We'll be focusing on prevention, building on our partnerships, including various other bodies that we haven't previously engaged with on this subject. The aim is to ensure we continue to support our residents long-term. To help take questions on the report, we have with us today Samantha Lake, Corporate Manager for Customer Operations, and Alyssa Dale, Cost of Living Coordinator, who was one of the first principles of the Cost of Living Plan, and her appointment has been key in carrying this out. So I'll hand over to them if you would like.
So you are proposing our guest, so may I have a seconder, please?
Sorry, I'm indeed proposing.
Yes. May I have a seconder, please? Councillor Helen Davis. Members of the Cabinet, do any of you have any questions? Councillor Derek Davis.
This is a great report. It really is. It shows a lot of hard work that's gone in over the past year even. So, you commended on that. But once again, it's become a bit of a hobby horse, but just like with the corporate refresh, I think we're missing a trick in terms of the armed forces. I'm not asking for anything special, not asking for them to get jump the queue, but the important thing is armed forces personnel serving and veterans are not disadvantaged. And I notice in there you've got the support does not discriminate against the 9 protected characteristics as defined by the Equality Act. Unfortunately, armed forces personnel serving or X are not protected characteristics. So I'd like to see that we can make a note that armed forces will definitely not be disadvantaged in any way, because, and I know it's just not anecdotally now, some of the, especially the lower ranks, families are really struggling, and there's a huge stigma attached, as you'd probably be aware, about going to food banks and in the services that can be exacerbated. So I would just like to see particular attention paid to that if it's possible.
Hello, can I just check that you can hear me and I'm not blocking the microphone with my laptop? Thank you. I think it's a really valid point. I think that we are very mindful that there are significant cohorts of people that are disproportionately impacted by the cost of living, and we've been quite conscious to try and embed a recognition for that throughout our approach in terms of the support that's been delivered, but also in terms of sort of the communications approach that we've taken. We've tried to adopt a bit of a twin approach to have quite targeted communications and also more broad brush. That means obviously trying to recognise where a household is at a disproportionate level of risk to try and make sure they can access information where and when they need it, but also to make sure that it is more widely available to the general public. I think particularly for issues like homelessness and other sort of tenancy sustainment issues, particularly upon leaving the armed forces, we're quite aware that there's a relative level of risk there, and so we do work quite closely with Housing Solutions as part of our business as usual, but also as recognised in the plan to try and address that. I'm quite happy to look at maybe specific ways and needs of that cohort and how we can support that further going forward, but it's definitely something that we're mindful of in our approach, that they are a vulnerable cohort in terms of those skills and abilities to sustain housing and things like that coming out, and how that can disproportionately make them vulnerable with these increased pressures.
Thank you, Alyssa.
Can I?
Yeah, Councillor Davis, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that, and it's good to hear. There's obviously, and again, it's not about gaining an advantage, but given the transit nature, as you've mentioned, about people leaving the armed forces, so they may leave in Portsmouth or Aldershot and then they come back to the Babergh area. Some may have disappeared from the system for some time, but of course there's also the ongoing problem with the transit, with the families being in transit as well. So they may come from one area to another area, don't know the system, aren't aware of the system that's been set up by you guys already, and so that needs particular attention. And if I can help in any way in terms of contract with SAFA and RBL, anything like that, I'd be more than happy to do that because you know they do slip through the net. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Carter and then Councillor Saw.
Thank you. Thank you for this. It's really informative. Of the things that we're doing. And they are really great things. Let me just start that before I go on. But to be able to be eligible for things like the LWAS, the HSF, the HAF, all the others, you have to be on the lowest income. But what about those who are slightly over that income and are struggling just as much, if anything, if not more, because they're not eligible for these things? Are we doing enough for them? Are we doing anything for them? They're not in the system. How are we catching them, and how are we supporting them?
Yeah, so again, I think it's really valid, and I think one of the most challenging things with that particular cohort is identifying them. It's quite easy to identify a very low income household because they'll be in receipt of the relevant benefits, they're on the radar with schools. It is more of a challenge to identify households who are on the brink and just about managing, but at a bit of a risk of not being able to make ends meet. I think that is something that we have tried to look at more closely in our look ahead and in the refreshed action plan, and it includes things like seeing how we can work more closely with SRP and housing to identify households who are in debt and building that holistic understanding of that. I think there's also a huge role to play here in terms of making every contact count as a council and recognising that need when it first presents. And that's why we've done sessions with frontline staff to talk about the support available so that they can signpost as and when it's appropriate on that initial contact. Some discretionary support does rely on being on an absolute low income like LWAS or being on free school meals where again the threshold is really low. But there is also other discretionary support that we can exercise. So the Household Support Fund through housing, if you're a tenant, it does not have an income threshold. It's very discretionary and they're able to really consider a person's eligibility based on their circumstances and what's led to them being in that point. But it's also raising awareness of things like energy grants and energy advice and that bit more of a preventative support that's available to make sure people feel equipped to signpost and refer at an earlier stage. In the Fuel Poverty Toolkit that we developed, it did include support as well for those just about managing households and households at risk. But it's definitely something that we would like to do more of as well and really understand how we can use our data to identify and really target those households at an earlier point.
Thank you. Councillor Carter. Councillor Saw.
I wondered whether you felt that there were any particular differences or challenges between the market towns and villages, because it's not clear how these initiatives are being made available to people in the villages who are always difficult to get to and identify.
Yeah, so there are unique challenges if you're obviously in a very rural area that don't necessarily present if you're in a sort of a more urban environment where, in terms of community transport and also just the prevalence of services in those areas that you might be likely to come across and access support. I think, again, we've tried to build some of that into the look ahead plan by looking at our approach to community transport. Obviously, as a county, the majority of that is managed by Suffolk County, so it's looking at opportunities to work with our colleagues there, but also, you know, what sits within our gift as a local authority in terms of sustainable community transport and explore things such as that. It's also we've tried to look at ways of getting information into those spaces and services into those spaces, working with partners like Citizens Advice to look at how they can be more accessible and present in different areas. And I think also recognising that needs in terms of like fuel poverty and food insecurity can vary very greatly depending on the sort of nature of the area within which you live, and trying to make that information more accessible by having it available online, like Suffolk Infolink, and also looking at like our digital skills support and trying to get out into some of those more secluded villages where there isn't necessarily that provision already there. So there definitely is a marked difference, but there are also common themes, and it's trying to tailor that support to the area within which we know there's need. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor McCraw.
Yes, I think both Councillor Carter's point about people who are, I suppose, on the margins or getting by, I should say getting by, struggling by, I think it's something we've all experienced at various times in our lives. Just getting by, and you know, there's a certain disconnect from people who are outside the benefits system but still have needs. And then Councillor Saw's point regarding villages and towns, I think one of the aspects of this version of the plan, the third one, is that we intend to make better use of our links with town and parish councils. The hyper-local approach is designed to actually address some of those points using the local knowledge that's available, not just using the previous partners that we've had. And we've had great success with those, but we need to extend this, and we need to consider this as a longer-term approach. So hopefully both those points can be addressed through that. It was a response to both Councillor Saw's and Councillor Carter's points. That's all I wanted to throw in there, because it is the feature of the report.
Thank you. Councillor Saw, you have a question.
Yeah. Regarding the, now I'm never too sure whether it's HAF or HAF programme, back to my hobby horse of the villages. There doesn't appear to be any provision for transporting children from the villages to the events. So unless their parents have cars, they can't participate. So how can we address this problem?
Again, I think it's a difficult one because it's understanding the level of need and actually having that data as to who we might be missing in those areas. I definitely think it's something that could be explored, but it would be a case of working quite closely with schools to understand actually who are we missing and what's the level of need there. And I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Vicky, but the locations for the HAF programmes were very much centred around those areas of need and deprivation across the districts and where it was felt that need was greatest. So I think when we're considering actually how can we make that more accessible to those in more rural areas, there's definitely a valid point there, and I think it's something that we can look at, but it would need further, I think, investigation with schools to really understand actually who is missing there and make sure that there is a role there possibly for them to play as well in terms of how we work better together.
Thank you.
Councillor Potter.
Yes, thank you. I just have a question on the rents. People have been finding themselves in debt. Obviously, you've got this household support fund that helps mitigate the impact and that support. Can you just sort of expand a little bit more on how that's helped? Would you look to sort of more than mitigate that help and try to, you know, make sure that not in the same situation come next year when the cost of living crisis deepens with heating and, you know, making those horrible choices of heating and eating, and also looking out for rent and any sort of further impacts you can sort of expand on for us, please?
Yeah, so I think this is one of the really nice ways in which we've delivered the Household Support Fund for tenants, is that it is delivered by our financial inclusion officers. And the application is really accessible on our website or over the phone. That's worked really well because it's meant that every time an application is assessed, it's assessed by somebody who is, by the nature of their role, used to giving benefits and income maximisation advice, completing charitable applications, advising on discretionary housing payments. So it naturally brings that household and that individual from a situation where they are really struggling to slightly change the narrative into a more longer term approach. And that has worked really well. That team are also very closely linked with our homelessness service, so where a tenancy and our gateway team, so where a tenancy is unaffordable, they're really well placed to give advice about longer term options to find either affordable housing or income maximisation to make sure that their tenancy is sustainable and try and mitigate that gap. So it does work quite well in terms of sort of trying to support households down that sort of more preventative pathway.
Any other questions? Councillor McLaren, do you have a question?
I've got two, if that's okay, Chair. My first question is about the food coordinator, which I think is a very imaginative appointment. How far along the appointment process are we?
Sorry, for the Food Network Coordinator role. Well, yeah, so that's been sent out to advert by Community Action Suffolk. It was live last week, so they'll be looking to interview and recruit really shortly for that role. So we anticipate hopefully they'll be in a position to move forward very soon, just depending on obviously the quality of applications that we get. But they've recently advertised for a similar role in East Suffolk to relative levels of success, and also to Suffolk County, so we're quite optimistic that we should be in a position to move forward quite soon.
My second question is about we were very successful last year with the warm spaces, which then emerged into sort of community cafes, etc. Some of the coordinators are actually getting anxious as to whether they will be able to receive some support funding this year. Can you comment on that? Thank you.
Yes, so Suffolk County commissioned some consultants to look at the impact that the warm space grants had last winter, and they're finalising that at the minute. So we're still awaiting an update as to what the findings of that were and what funding may or may not be available this year. But the grants team are obviously very well equipped to give advice and to chat through what support an organisation may be eligible to access. So I think for any project coordinators that are looking for sort of security to help continue their initiatives, they could contact the grants team either via the form on the website or by emailing them, and they'd be really happy to chat through what else might be available to support them in the interim while we wait that confirmation from County and the CCB.
Thank you, Eliza. Thank you.
Councillor McCraw.
As an addition and a suggestion as a response to Councillor McLaren, I'd also suggest that members' locality budgets can be used on a hyper-local basis to support warm spaces in their own communities. And I know that there are a number of these locality budgets which are not fully spent at the end of the year.
That's actually a very good point, yes. Yep.
That's why I made it.
Particularly on the underspend, we have got that money. We do need to make sure that we use it to its full capability. Okay, members of the Cabinet, anyone wish to take part in the debate? Anyone got anything they'd like to say? Councillor Derek Davis.
Yeah, I just want to back up what Councillor McCraw has said about councillors, not just with a locality budget, but actually physically being able to help the whole of the communities team in everything they do in this, getting the word out, getting residents and matching them up, and being more proactive. All councillors, not just cabinet members. Obviously, we can do that. In terms of the holiday activity fund for Deborah, there's three things there. First of all, I know in Great Cornard they've used a minibus from the Stevenson Centre to help pick up children. The locality officers, certainly we had a very successful half in Shotley, and the locality officers there ensured that it was on the bus route and that when the bus times it fitted in between them, because rare buses obviously, and again councillors can help. I seconded one of the mums and we did a couple of journeys down to Shotley Gate to pick up children to come up, although we did try and encourage them to walk because it was a beautiful day. So, you know, as long as you stick to your guidance, which I think there's lots of ways that councillors can support the team. But But I think this is an excellent report. The whole thing, all the work that's gone into it, it's very detailed, and it shows the progress that's been made. So, and I know Councillor McCord will thank the team, but I think it's been a great piece of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Yeah. Okay. I'd like to second that, because clearly there's been a huge amount that's gone into this, and it is very thorough. A couple of, I think, interesting statistics or data in the report that really kind of highlights the fact that it's going to take some time. There's going to be a huge amount of work that's going to need to go on for quite a long period, beyond sort of the headlines we see nationally, because we see in, I can't remember which section it was. If I just have a quick go back to the report again. Sorry, I'm just going to see where that I was looking at on page. Yeah, it's on page 80. The key information. We see the rate of inflation has fallen to 6.3%, and I know that's the CPIH rate, and there are a number of different indices that are fairly similar but give slightly different figures. You've got CPI, CPIH, whether it includes or excludes food, energy, and non-alcoholic drinks. But the key one for me, I think, is the fact that the rate for the food and non-alcoholic together is still high. Although it's dropped a lot, it's still 13.6, and that's a number you don't often hear in the media, that they focus on the fact that the CPIH has reduced to 6.3, but if you look at just food and non-alcoholic alone, it's still significantly higher than that, and that's the thing that's going to have a huge impact on people. The other data that's here, which is quite worrying, is the fact that homelessness cases are increasing by a huge amount. We've got 31% increase on last year, but more importantly, a 92% increase in homelessness as a result of domestic abuse. So there's going to be a long-term knock-on effect that we're going to have to respond to for a considerable period. Anyone else got anything else that they wish to say? Councillor McCraw.
Just that I think page 93 of the report, which shows you the infographic and highlights, tells you a marvellous story. 5.75 million nearly distributed since the plan was first approved. I mean, that's a significant amount of money, but it's also a significant amount of resources, and not just supplied by ourselves, but it just shows that pre-planning and continuing that plan works. I think the team have done a great job.
Yes, and that infographic in its entirety is excellent. It's got all of the key data there at a glance. It's so helpful, so useful, and it shows what has been done and the benefit of it all. So, thank you, Alyssa. Thank you. I think we'll move to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Members will have to scroll down to the blue line on the page. Thank you, members. That's 7 votes for. That's unanimous.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on. We've got the next item is item 12, 11, of course, BCA 2319, the Babergh Suffolk District Council Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Implementation Plan. I'd like to invite the Cabinet Member for Environment to introduce the report. Councillor Potter.
Yep, thanks very much, Chair. So it's my pleasure to introduce this report, a draft of the emerging Babergh Suffolk and District Council EV Infrastructure Plan, referred to as EVIP for short. the Suffolk local authorities members all in 2019 recognised the climate emergency, setting in their aspiration of making the county of Suffolk carbon neutral by 2030. In the same year, tailpipe emissions were then responsible for almost a fifth, that's around 19% of the UK's total domestic greenhouse gas emissions. This demonstrated the significance of the impact, therefore, and the need to reduce and remove tailpipe emissions in response to climate change, and further highlights that the goal of decarbonisation of transport is a key action in order to achieve the overall goal of carbon neutrality. The UK is committed to ending the sale of new petrol and diesel cars now, as we know, by 2035. It's therefore widely accepted there'll be a shift to EV vehicles in the coming years. What's important is that the rollout for infrastructure to support this, to keep up with the demand, is important for all councils to demonstrate a commitment to assist it, laying out how they intend to play their role in the whole infrastructural rollout itself. The district level plan will be complementary to the emerging Suffolk County Council's EV strategy. EV in the plan utilises predictions regarding the likely uptake of EVs figures which have been projected by consultancy modelling work. This has been done both by Transport East and Suffolk County Council. These make estimations on how much publicly available charge points will be installed across the districts for each 2 to 5 years, and that runs up until 2040. The EVIP will address how the council might be able to install EV charge points upon their own land, and also how they'll help communities and businesses play their part in infrastructure rollout. In order to make those recommendations on where the council may be able to take the lead as landowners in infrastructure installation, a GIS map tool has been developed, helping to inform officers where installations may be appropriate and useful. It should be noted that the suggestions regarding potential locations for installations are still all subject to further investigation, and each installation will be dependent on feasibility factors. These include power supply connectivity, but the list of potential locations provides a very useful start point for both the council and its partners. There's no specific funding that's attached to this plan, but it's intended to be used as a tool to leverage investment to EV infrastructure. This ensures that councils are then prepared for ideas on where infrastructure could be usefully implemented as and when funding is secured. If Cabinet members are happy with the councils having and publishing an EVIP, and are generally happy with the framework and the content of the plan so far, then it's recommended, therefore, for members to agree the plan and delegate the further drafting with ongoing feedback in mind. The publishing of the plan document then will be completed to the Director for Economic Growth and Climate Change. And that ends my introduction to this report.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. You're proposing the report. May I have a seconder? Councillor Carter. Members of the Cabinet, do you have any questions? Councillor Derek Davis.
Yeah, my question is really, we see that we have quite an ambitious, some would say, predicted EVCP requirement, 663 by 2040, even 112 in the next 2 years. And yet we're only looking at short-term requirements that we put in Babergh 29 to 52 for public use. There's quite a disparity there. How are we going to make up the shortfall? And I've got a follow-up question. That's the thing. How are we going to make up that shortfall, first of all?
I'd like to refer that to Catherine Davis, please.
Catherine, will you go on? Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you. So the figures that are demonstrated there in the EVIP about the prediction of the amount of chargers that we'll need are a total figure of publicly accessible chargers. So it's not expected that the council will lead on that entire rollout. Some of that will be delivered by sort of commercial partners. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I do have the advantage of hearing the presentation yesterday, so that's really helpful. But I think that my next question is, how do we encourage, A, the village halls to put more EV charging points in themselves, and also how do we encourage businesses? And is it possible, and I include myself in this, to have a really simple idiot's guide about how you can get an EV C2P outside your village hall?
Yes, so our kind of strategy to help facilitate that for our communities and businesses is to provide good quality information. So as you suggest, a toolkit, a kind of idiot's guide, as you say, to how to install a charger is something that we can develop as part of a toolkit. At the moment, we tend to signpost to the Plug-in Suffolk programme for anything to do with village halls, community centres, sports clubs, and that kind of facility, because that is some funding that Suffolk County Council have secured for exactly that purpose. And in terms of our businesses, we will work with them via the UK SPF funding. We have some funding secured through that to deliver more EV charge points, and we are looking to set up a grant scheme for our visitor economy businesses for that.
Yeah, thank you for that. All I would say is, no disrespect to our Suffolk County Council colleagues, but a lot of parishes still don't know what's available. So the signposting is probably not working as well as it could do. And perhaps that's because it's a bit of a reaction thing rather than being proactive.
If I could just come back on that. Thank you for flagging up that point. There's certainly some work we can do to help signpost people to the Plug-in Suffolk programme if there is a lack of awareness. We're going to be delivering some climate action community roadshows in the coming month, and we will be signposting for local communities to the Plug-in Suffolk programme via those events. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor McLaren, do you have any questions?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay, we'll move it open to debate. Anyone wish to say anything, members of the Cabinet? Right, well, I think we're all, it's a very thorough report, and thank Daniel for the introduction, and Catherine, thank you for all the effort you put into this, and we've just got to get these rolled out. The difficulty, I think, is that we are a very spread out rural area, and it's making sure we can identify and provide EV charging points in the locations where they're really going to be needed. It's not just in the towns, but it's everywhere else. But even within our towns, Hadley at the moment has just got the two, and to see additional locations come forward in Hadley would be very helpful there. So I'm very happy with the plan as it is. So we'll move to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, members. That's 7 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Item 12, paper BCA 2320, Employer Supported Volunteering Policy. I'll now invite the Cabinet Member for People and Places to introduce the report. Councillor Saw.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to introduce Agenda Item 12, Report Number BCA 2320, Employer Supported Volunteering Policy. As was so evident during the pandemic, volunteers play an important role in any active and engaged community, and we see the difference volunteers make across our districts every day. But between March 2020 and May 2021, around 1 in 3 voluntary community, faith and social enterprise organisations reported a decline in the number of their volunteers. Volunteering currently is at a historic low in England. People who were lifelong volunteers broke their habit during the pandemic, and they haven't got it back yet. Data from the Charities AIDS Foundation's UK Giving Report found that only 13% of people said they volunteered in the last year, compared with 17 pre-pandemic, representing about 1.6 million fewer people volunteering over the past 5 years. CAS report also reveals something that we all know, that volunteering is overwhelmingly the preserve of older people. The implementation of an employee-supported volunteering scheme has the potential to deliver benefits for both councils and the local community, as well as well-being benefits for those undertaking volunteering, creating a win-win situation for all involved. Recipient organisations, i.e. the charities, gain skills, advice and expertise, whilst our employees achieve a sense of giving back and making a difference. They also gain the opportunity to develop key skills in areas such as coaching, leadership and organisational abilities. In return, the councils enhance their employer brand and reputation with their employees, residents and wider society, whilst improving communication and understanding of the local community. Through an ESV scheme, the councils can support their work towards creating social value, and it contributes to our priority outcomes. A recent report from NCVO found that individuals were likely to work for an employer that encourages and promotes volunteering. Of 80% of those who took part in volunteering reported increased community awareness, 65% had increased communication skills, and 59% reported an increase in confidence. The Council currently has no formal policy on volunteering in place and does not actively offer any provision for employee-supported volunteering, unlike many of our neighbouring organisations, including the County Council, Ipswich Borough Council and East Suffolk District Council, all of which support their staff to volunteer or engage with voluntary bodies through employer-supported volunteering. This will be the first ECV policy for the councils, and I'm both excited and pleased to present this report today.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. May I have a seconder? Councillor Derek Davis. Members of the Cabinet, any questions? Councillor Derek Davis.
I was going to make a suggestion, but I'll do it in the form of a question. I think this is brilliant, absolutely great, and I totally agree about the amount of volunteers we saw during COVID, which shows there is a willingness among our communities to get involved and to help. And one of the things that I've noticed as well is the amount of youngsters, would you agree, that have been involved. Is it possible in this scheme, and not just to promote, support our own employees, to offer a blue badge, like a Blue Peter badge type reward, so people can be rewarded in a tangible way for doing the volunteer work, and also when those young people then go to an employer and say, look, I've done this and I've got my Babergh badge, whatever it's called, to do that.
I think I'm going to defer to the officers on this one.
Thank you. We are kind of starting to do that. We've started a process of rewarding our employees who do currently already volunteer. So Bethany's been working with our comms team. We've been putting things in working together, and we've been conducting surveys of all of our employees who have participated, who volunteer for organisations within the district. And those that have volunteered, if they work for a local organisation within the district, then we are awarding a nominal sum of funding just to support that particular organisation, but also that individual will be welcome to kind of a celebration event that will be held sort of at Endeavour House or a locality or somewhere in their localities. And as a result, and I think we could take that further, like you say, a certificate is something that demonstrates that that young person or young employee has done a great job, not only within the workplace, but also to support their communities in X, Y, and Z. So we've already started that process. That's that's happening now, I believe, with the view of doing that celebration event towards the latter part of this year. I think in November? In November. So we have sent out some comms, but we can reshare that if that would be of interest. If you've managed to recognise that you have a swathe of information that come past and come through your email, so we can reshare that if that would be of interest, Councillor.
Anyone else got any questions? Councillor Helen Davis.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. It's a brilliant report and it's really worthwhile. I've done that when I was working, and our parish clerk's husband does it now in our village. He cleans the road signs and cuts back the vegetation. And it might only be a little bit of work, but it has such a big impact. So I think this is so worthwhile. I did have a wonder. Councillor Derek Davis referred to the younger cohort of volunteers. Is this something in a phase 2 that could maybe be extended to local sixth form colleges, for example?
I'm sure the officers have a view on this, and I know that there is work that we do with schools.
Certainly, this report is very much focused on the support that the council provides to its own employees in terms of volunteering, but certainly something to pick up with the cabinet member going forwards is how we as a council support volunteering within our wider communities. We already work closely with Community Action Suffolk, work closely with Volunteering Matters, and it's something that we can look to do. Things get quite complicated once you're looking at volunteers that are under the age of 18. That can be complicated both for the individuals and for the organisations that are hosting them. That doesn't mean it shouldn't happen, and there are all sorts of benefits to young people volunteering. It just, there's another layer of things that you just need to work through to make it kind of safe for everyone ultimately. But that's certainly something that we can pick up. As I say, this report is very much about the support for employees, but the role that we play in supporting volunteers out in the wider community can be almost a kind of phase 2 or something that we continue to work on within the team and with the cabinet member.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor McLaren?
Thank you. My question is about the type of volunteering. I'm just going to be Councillor Derek Davis to the question. When people volunteer for the likes of the Armed Forces or the Coast Guard or something like that, my concern when I read the report was that a maximum of 3 days paid leave seemed a bit restrictive. Would there be any flexibility in that amount?
Tom, is that something you...
Well, I think we should, if you look at the report, Finance has calculated the cost of these 3 days. We know that not everybody is going to take 3 days volunteering. In fact, experience shows, looking at other councils and looking at the county council, that their experience was, I think, 1.6 to 2.3% of the workforce took it up. So although it is a exceptionally good scheme with a lot of benefits, there is a cost associated with it that I think we need to be aware of. Tom?
So if I could just bring Bethany in, because there's a relationship between some of the other council's policies that Bethany will just be able to explain to you. And then I just have a very small point, which is that anybody can volunteer outside of this policy. Any of our staff can volunteer as much as they wish to. This policy is just about giving a certain amount of time within their paid time, but clearly people can volunteer beyond that. But Bethany, did you want to?
So just to answer your question, Councillor McLaren, members of the Reserves Forces actually have a special leave policy that comes under leave. The leave policy, so it's a standalone issue separate to the volunteering policy. So I hear what you're saying. It is just that reserve forces are then covered elsewhere. Kind of hope that helps.
Right, if there are no further questions, we'll move to debate. Councillor McCraw.
Yeah, I'm particularly pleased to see that the recommendation included 510, that the volunteering allowance is not limited to new volunteering, because the existing amounts of work should be recognised, and you don't want to get into that situation where only new users get the insurance rates in their first year and everybody else gets stuck with the old rates or increased. This is something we should support, and maybe we can raise it a little bit beyond 2.3%. It's voluntary activity, but fundamentally there's no community can live without it. So we should go full hog on this.
Thank you, Councillor McCraw. Anybody else? Certainly, I think that clearly there is obviously a financial cost to this, but that's more than made up in terms of the fact that it clearly is valued by those that take part. It makes them appreciate what they're doing in terms of volunteering, but also I'm sure it helps in their employment as well, in terms of their morale. I agree, Councillor McCraw, we need to promote this as much as we can and make sure it's a success. And certainly, in terms of the percentage uptake, we could probably beat the Suffolk County Council at 2.3%. That would be that's a target to aim for. But I think just everything in the report is something I think we should endorse and proceed with. So on that note, Councillor Derek Davis.
Yeah, I'm just going to go back to my point. Maybe not a Blue Peter badge, but perhaps to help promote within the staff and themselves as a talking point, perhaps a lanyard that indicates whether it's purple, gold, blue, whatever. You know, that would say, I'm a volunteer and I do this, and then somebody can say, oh, how come you've got X lanyard? And you can explain, and if they don't already aware of the policy, they can use it as an example. So exactly as you and Councillor McCraw have said, you know, we're promoting it among the officers, because all the other bits are absolutely great, but sometimes if they want to wear it, of course, some of them might want to hide their light under a bush or whatever. But, you know, just an idea.
Okay. Councillor Carter.
Sorry, quickly, just to follow on with that, like with the Duke of Edinburgh Award, where you can put it on your CV and actually it does so much for you that it gives young people a sense of purpose within their community, instead of sort of being ostracised, I suppose, by the community, saying, well, I helped out with this, this and this, and not only do I get the rewarding benefit from it, but I have something physical on my CV which will then help me later in life. It's definitely something we should be promoting. I think it's brilliant.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move to the vote then.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, members. That vote is 7 votes for, and that's carried.
Thank you. Item 13, paper BCA 2321, revised safeguarding policy for children, young people and adults at risk. I will now invite the Cabinet Member for People and Places to introduce the report. Councillor Saw.
Thank you, Chair. I have pleasure in introducing item report BCA 2321, revised safeguarding policy, children, young people and adults. The purpose of this report is to ask Cabinet to approve the revised safeguarding policy to ensure that an overarching approach to safeguarding is embedded across the councils, identifying roles and responsibilities of employees, councillors and volunteers. It also will apply to organisations delivering on behalf of the council. This revised policy outlines the procedures to be adopted by both councils in ensuring the safety of children, young people and adults at risk. The revised policy picks up all current legislative requirements and expectations of local authorities and provides an easy-to-use set of guidance on how to report a safeguarding concern. To support this policy, officers have developed a thorough and detailed action plan which will see an increased focus on a regular annual review of the policy via the Council's Section 11 audit process, greater sharing of related guidance and procedures, employee and councillor training, and the development of a council-wide safeguarding champions group made up of officers from frontline teams to share information and best practice. The policy has been shared and consulted on with an extensive list of partners, including the Suffolk Safeguarding Partnership, our health alliances, local authority partners, and the safeguarding training team at Community Action Suffolk. I'm glad to say all of which have complemented the revised draft as comprehensive with easy to follow guidance. I have pleasure in submitting the report.
Thank you, Councillor Saw. So you're proposing a report. May I have a seconder? Councillor Derek Davis. Thank you. Before we go into questions, I just wanted to thank Rachel Young, our Assistant Manager for Community Safety, because I understand she's put in a huge amount of work into this report, and we can see that it is very thorough, and it does make for a very good and interesting read, and I do want to formally acknowledge that in this meeting. So, Cabinet members, any questions? Derek Davis.
You probably won't know this off the top of your head, Rachel, but how many council workers have DBS checks already? And is it an easy format for them to have? And perhaps the leader might this. Do you think all councillors should be DBS checked?
Do I think all councillors should be DBS checked? I hadn't even considered that. I don't know. I think that might be overkill. It's a DBS check is a very thorough. It's a very detailed, thorough process. Time-consuming. I don't think we can. There's something we need to pick up on outside of this meeting. But what was the first part of the question?
I'm not sure we have the actual figure for that, but I know that we have in developing the whole policy, obviously we've included DBS checks in here. And what that has done is instigated us to do some work around what roles that sit within the council require to be DBS checked. Are they DBS checked? Are the officers DBS checked? Which they should be if there's a box to be ticked. But also then, what's the review period for those DBS checks for those officers that have been in post for a significant number of years? Because we recognise that if you have somebody who's DBS at the beginning of their employment, and they're in post for more than 10 years, then actually we need to make sure that we're doing those regular checks. So, for example, I know that I've received a long list of posts within my team, and I've been going through those that require DBS. Is it still current? And that information is being used at the moment by HR. So we will be able to generate those reports, but we probably just don't have the specific figures for you now. All locality officers are DBS checked.
Thank you.
Unsupervised access to children and vulnerable adults. We have a very long list in terms of those staff at the moment, but as Vicky says, we are revising that. And our policy is very clear that people's DBS in those relevant posts will be reviewed every 3 years.
Thank you, Cathy. Any other questions? Councillor Carter.
Just keeps having weird feedback. I'm really sorry. So a couple, if okay, and I'll try and separate them. But children, young people that aren't, I suppose, in the system, aren't being flagged up, but are at risk. We are aware that it's happening. I think that COVID again was a good example where we very easily highlighted the vulnerable children and young people and managed to, although be it some was only during the school times, we only took them out of their homes during then. But what are we doing to work closely with those around them to ensure that they are getting help before it gets too late? If you have children that aren't attending school, children and young people that aren't attending school or college or for whatever reason, don't have social workers, don't see people on the regular, what are we doing to help them? What are we doing to seek them out? Are we doing anything?
I think you're absolutely right, and I think the purpose of this policy is very much an internal document about our roles and responsibilities whilst we are here at work, and obviously we don't provide many of those statutory services that are perhaps provided by either Suffolk County Council, probation services, but we do support younger people in lots of different ways. So it is important that we train our staff, we train members, we train our volunteers, and also any organisations that we're commissioning services from recognise the signs where support is needed, and they know how to make those referrals. They can check in with members of the team to understand, actually, this is what I saw, this is how it made me feel, what do I do about it? And so it's around supporting people wherever they are, whether that's in the communities in a particular role, to report a safeguarding concern, so that can be picked up by the relevant organisations which sit in the county council. But other things that we do as a district, for example, is around ensuring that we provide warm, safe homes for those that need it. So our social housing is in good standard. Things like the holiday and food activity funding, which is about supporting those young people who may not have access to warm food. So it's where they might just kind of not purposely neglected, but neglected in that sense. We've launched our youth social prescribing programme, which is about putting youth workers in schools to work with young individuals in that kind of preventative space to ensure that we do capture them and try to remove barriers from them accessing support, whether that's access to a local football group, transport to an arts class, whatever that might be. So they have support in school, but as well as outside of school. So where we can do more, we absolutely will. And of course we support a number of local community volunteer organisations within the district through our community grants, and also we have different funding awards throughout the year, and we certainly would make sure that some of the KPIs, the impacts we would like to see for young people are in there as well. So I would say that I could probably go on and pick up other services as well around public spaces, open, public realm, but play areas, some of our sport provision. There's a lot going on that would help to support to capture some of those young people.
Just about the system, I suppose there's a long, particularly mental health waiting list for all age groups. Is there anything that we can do about that locally? And also, what about people that are getting lost in the system? So they think that they've made a referral and they haven't. Things are getting more difficult. I suppose just signposting people to the right help, and then perhaps even just a follow-up to ensure that they haven't just gone to see a GP and it's ended there, but they are actually on a waiting list and there is somebody looking out for them or coming for them at some point.
I think what we would need to do with regards to that is take that away. So we are partners or members of the Suffolk Safeguarding Partnership Forum, which meets regularly to discuss issues such as that. And I suspect that there are processes in place to try and do that. So we can raise that at the next partnership meeting and make sure that we come back and provide you with an update.
Representation on the Integrated Care Partnership Board, the Suffolk Safeguarding Board and the two alliance committees for the Ipswich and East and West. We as a collective of multi-agency individuals regularly make representations about the lack of services to meet the demand in terms of young people's mental health.
Any other questions? Councillor McLaren, do you have any questions?
I'll just say, Chair, I was going to ask the same question as Councillor Davis asked.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to debate now. Does anyone wish to say anything? Councillor McCraw.
Yeah, I'm just looking through the report. I think it's important not to try and massively change the content of the report. And I think it's important to note and to point out in this public forum that all our staff receive mandatory first and second level training as part of their inductions, and it's refreshed. There is mandatory training for all councillors, renewable every 3 years. And having been married to a teacher all my life, and I'm very aware of what risks can exist and how many things there are, I'd be a little concerned about putting a whole bunch of people who are pretty unlikely to have the need of DBS training, and therefore blocking people who really do need DBS training. There is only so much training available from the trainers. So I think we're probably okay. To make the suggested change would actually change our policy. So I think perhaps at the next refresh that could be considered, however, but I don't think we can consider it now. But obviously I'm fully in support of this, because who wouldn't be?
Thank you, Councillor McCraw. Anybody else? In which case, are we all happy to move to the vote on the policy as it currently stands? Yep, we'll move to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, members. That's 7 votes for, that's carried.
Thank you. Right, moving on to item 14, the last item, and that is paper BCA 2315, the confidential minute of the meeting held on the 5th of September. We will go into closed session if there are any comments on the confidential minutes. So does anyone wish to comment? So we're happy to go to the vote to approve these minutes. Then we'll go straight to the vote then.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, members. That's 6 votes for and 1 abstention, so that's carried, Chair.
Thank you. Right, well that concludes this evening's meeting. The date and time of the next meeting, it'll be Tuesday the 7th of November at 4